This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 29th of August, 2019, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K, your host. Again, in case you missed it, this is Winning Headlines. Let's take a look at today's headlines.
I have another today in history.
Okay,
I feel like this is becoming my thing now.
You can do it.
So, 29th of August, 1983, President Arap Moi is re-elected unopposed as MP of Baringo Central and President of Kenya.
Let me just give some context.
I think this needs context.
Right?
Yes.
This all began in 1982 when the coup happened in August.
Yeah.
And thereafter, in about June of 83, he dissolved Parliament and called for fresh elections. And the whole idea was to establish hegemony in government.
Yep.
So in the 83 election where he was, elected, he got rid of people like Gigi Karaoke, people like Njonjo, people like Kamodo, who were all...
Before they used to ride in his car.
Yeah, they used to ride in his limo.
In his inner circle.
Absolutely, his inner circle.
But he had to establish hegemony.
He did.
Yeah.
And there was no other candidate for president, therefore he would be elected unopposed as president of Kenya in our single-party country with KANU.
That's
Now
right.
you know more.
Headlines. The Star. Linturi was both cruel and romantic. The Standard. 10 governors hunted in 6 billion shilling tax probe. And Daily Nation. Property, power and the church. I have to say I really like this headline. The headline, but let's start with Star drama.
More gossip.
More gossip here.
Linturi was both cruel and romantic. You guys, I have to say this again. I feel like we are always being dragged into their personal drama and it's too much for me. Please.
But at the same time, you can clearly tell that one of them wants this to be in the media. They want us to be talking about it. For what that reason might be, I don't know.
And I think it's pretty obvious who wants us to be talking about it. And it's the lady on the headline here. Mary Ann
perfect
Kitani.
picture.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate that maybe she has
ambitions.
An interest. She has political ambitions. And if she does, this is very clever because this is now about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks worth of headlines.
Yes, free publicity.
Free publicity, and people are really sympathizing with her.
And it's a champion principle. All publicity, even if it's bad publicity, is good publicity.
But let's talk about this headline. Both cruel and romantic. Those sound like two words that should not be on the same sentence.
I think we've done a book in the past, and it's called the LUCIFER principle.
Yes.
And I think that what this shows us is what we saw in that book, that goodness and badness, good and evil, bad and worse, are two sides of the same coin. And as much as they loved each other is as much as they now hate each other.
Hate each other.
So we're just seeing that.
Yeah, maybe divorce is the right thing for them to do.
Maybe.
Anyway, we all together, I think, trash this one.
Wait, we trash it, but as we trash it, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines for you. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Is that headline topical or is it speculative? Is it repetitive or is it groundbreaking? And finally, is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Can we add one for trashy? I'm sorry, I just read the upper bit of this headline. I'm not even, shall I?
Yeah, she'll go for it.
Kitani claims she found nudes on Linturi's phone. Oh my goodness, wow.
10 billion. Let's see, 10 governors hunted in 6 billion tax probe.
Yes.
So the KRA has now set their sights on even more people, and they've decided that in a bid to recover billions of shillings, they have arrested, or they're looking to have a probe on 600 individuals, 10 of which are governors. And I think that when we think about the fact that we have, 42 governors?
47 governors.
47 governors, that's a lot. To say that 10 of those governors have some dodgy tax issues going on.
Okay, if the government is broke and we're trying to look for money, wouldn't it be better if instead of looking for money in the past, we let these people continue doing business and then we claim from them in the future?
Yeah.
Because as you hold them in abeyance, they stop making money, they use the money they have, and besides, no one sits with that. If I didn't pay my taxes, I didn't save it, I can assure you I spent it.
What KRA ought to keep in mind is that we have the carrot and the stick, right? And what they're using here is the stick. But maybe if they decided to use a carrot, they could actually end up raking in more money.
More money, that's true.
And there's an example that I give of the bad Samaritans all the time. Right? Bad Samaritans, catch us on Wednesday. On the Fifth Estate.
I wonder if you're going to pull that.
And there's an example that I gave from South Korea. And when the president, Park Chung-hee, came into power in about 1963, there was a lot of corrupt individuals who had made their fortunes, right? But instead of prosecuting them, he started afresh with them, and he entered into an arrangement where they would now invest in strategic industries that he wanted his government to take.
It makes sense. Once you hold them,
it succeeded.
It succeeds because once you hold them, then you stop them paying taxes. You stop them working at all, and even the incidental tax you got from the people who work for them, that also comes to an end.
Absolutely.
If you want money, go.
Yeah, and I think
alternatively, we could also even give them tax incentives, and that's what Russia did in 2002 when Vladimir Putin came into power. He gave a lot of the companies low tax burdens, and they ended up collecting way more.
But if they want to use the stick, I say use big data. Go see who's living a bigger life than the taxes they're paying.
I think at the end of the day, the bigger issue here might just come down to our laws. We have very retributive laws when it comes to taxes. So they're retroactive, which means that at the end of the day, they are retroactive. They are retroactive. They are retroactive. They can go back and say,
in time,
we are in 2019, but in 2009 you did not pay, therefore we request that money. But I mean, as we think about Humphrey Kariuki, they're saying that he has 41 billion he's not paid. Does he have 41 billion in his account right now?
Of course not. He's put that money into other investments.
Oh, we're tossing this, right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
I think we tossed that.
Finally, property, power, and the church.
Yes. So this headline is about the succession in the NCCK. Reverend here is his term has come to an end, and another reverend has been chosen to succeed him. But there are people within the council who are saying that this is all about protecting the property of certain individuals
within the church.
Within the council and the church.
So are they trying to tell us, as West African proverb says, that a goat eats where it's tethered, and these goats have been eating very much where they were tethered in the NCCK?
Who knows? Perhaps.
Possibly.
But let me give a little sermonette here, right?
All right. Could we hold on. Before you start, cue the organ music. There you go.
For the people of the church, and for NCCK as they go through this period, please recall the words of Jesus in the chapter of Luke, the book of Luke, chapter 16, verse 3. And he was talking about two systems. And he says, no servant can serve two masters at the same time. Either you will hate one or love the other. And he named the masters, our Father who art in heaven, and money, right? And so the world is ruled by money, and money is the root of all evil. And that's what these people ought to remember, that if they pursue the money too much, they will let go of the kingdom of God, which is what we were told to pursue.
Lest we forget another part of the Bible that declares that you must give your 10%.
Yes, you
must. Bring ye all the tithe to the storehouse. And this here just so happens to be the storehouse. I don't know.
Yeah, but this altogether, I think, is a brilliant headline.
Fantastic headline.
I love the headline. The stories are still a little bit speculative, but I do love the headline. It's catchy, it's powerful. I really want to read it.
It's a change of tune, and I think that a lot of our followers on Twitter had the same feeling. They voted for this as their winning headline as well.
And I think we give it. Our winning headline goes to The Daily Nation. On to our next segment, the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a three-part criteria that we use to break them down for you. We ask ourselves, is the cartoon humorous or is it dry? Is it satirical or is it pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy?
Right. And so we begin with a star. And what we have here is a seat by the name Kibra. And then you've got a curtain. Presumably, on one side you've got by-election, on the other you've got BBI, and this is going to be a shadow contest. This is probably in light of the Kibra by-election that's going to happen. And I think what Ozone is suggesting here is that
yes, what is he suggesting?
The by-election is going to be the dry run perhaps for BBI.
Yeah.
This is what I'm sensing here, and you've got Raila and Ruto who
are behind the curtain.
Who are behind the curtain, ready to get onto the
so
boxing
he says
ring.
Shadow contest is the by-election and BBI is the real contest.
It's a real contest.
Yeah, I think it took us a long time to analyze this cartoon before we were able to come here comfortably and discuss
this conclusion. I don't know, and for that reason, it's not particularly exciting. Yeah. I say we toss it.
As Prof was saying, if it takes you that long to analyze a cartoon...
Let's do the Daily Nation first. I don't want to preempt what's happening. Let's look at the twins. And see what Ndula has for us.
Jules, why don't you describe this for us?
All right, so here we have the in a nutshell. Right? So we have Sosisione, who is, he has a nut on his head, he's holding a bowl, waiting for coins to come from TSC, but he also is tethered to a socket.
And it's a begging bowl, by the way.
It's a begging bowl, yes it is. I think this is in relation to the unions who are fighting over the pay rise and who's going to get that share of it.
But they're willing to get their share. And what I really don't understand is why he's coming unplugged.
Well, today he was almost unplugged.
Okay,
there was a meeting that was supposed to happen.
In the sense of anger, or unplugged in the sense of losing his position?
Losing his position. I think that's what
I think again, just like Ozone, this is a cartoon that's a bit too hard to analyze. I think by the time you're having to ask questions, just...
And I have been a critic of Gado for the past couple of weeks. I think I have been saying that he lost his inspiration, and I feel like today he went and found it. And for that reason, I will describe this cartoon. We have a tiger, very well drawn, impeccably drawn. And on it has this collar that has Kenyatta, Moi, Odinga, and the tiger, the stripes are written dynasties, and on it you have a caricature of WSR William Samoei Ruto hanging on for dear life as this tiger bounds into the future. And we have Gado's Msema Kweli statement of truth, right, saying riding a tiger is one thing, dismounting from it is a different story. And I have to say, I love this cartoon. It's a loaded cartoon. I like it. I love this cartoon because it shows the history, the political history of WSR. He came into power on the tails of each of these political dynasties. And when he's now trying to make a name of his own, a break of his own, this is what's happening. That train is still going, and he has to dismount it while in motion. I love it. I think it's perfect. I think it shows the state of his life right now. It really does. I think it's fantastic. Gado is back, possibly. I know, and I love it. Welcome back, Gado. When you're good, you're so good.
So good. This is our winning cartoon.
I agree.
Yes, I agree, definitely.
Whatever it is you're smoking, please keep smoking it. And we have a winning cartoon from Gado of the Standard. Yes. What is our final thought?
Yes. Today, our final thought is inspired by the history of forensic, in specific, fingerprints.
Before you go into that, I think I'm going to give us a context of what we've been doing this week. And this week we've been taking ourselves through innovations and looking at them from different perspectives. On Monday and Tuesday we looked at cars and electricity, forks and potatoes. Why those two things? There were innovations that when originally introduced got a lot of rejection, but eventually everyone accepted them, and now we use them all the time, every day. And then yesterday we looked at incentives to spur innovation. Can I use something like, for instance, prize money to get people to solve a problem that was there? And would they solve it for the reason of the money or because the problem is there? And yesterday we looked at how longitudes were solved as a problem and how it was fixed because of a prize that was set up in the UK. Today we're looking at innovations. We flip the story a little bit and we look at innovations that were accepted and have become a legal standard. And that's what we are. All three of us here on this table today are lawyers, and we're looking at things that are legal standards. Things like fingerprints, things like DNA, that guess what? Got accepted without any question.
So I think today when looking at fingerprints, we want to look at it as an innovation that I think is almost 190 years old. And it's something that we accepted wholesale globally, but we didn't really question. We've not questioned objectively whether it is the right thing to be using in criminal evidence. So as early as the Qing dynasty in 200 BC, the Chinese were using fingerprints as signatures. And they were noting that experience has shown that no two individuals have the same fingerprint.
And I think note what you've said. Experience has shown. And I think that's objective science.
And I think that's something that we're going to question today because it is experience. So as early as 200 BC, they're using it, a thumbprint, as a sign of a signature. And then in the mid-1800s, a British magistrate named William Herschel observed that the Indian custom of inking hands or fingers alongside autographs or contracts was a common thing. So such agreements were often honored. They were more honored than they were disputed. And so in 1858, this man Herschel started requiring fingerprints on contracts while in India. So this is at the height of the British Empire, and he has no way to make the natives agree to the agreements that they come up with. So he says, I'm going to make you do the thing that you do as a community.
Put your fingerprint.
Put your fingerprint on it. And soon the British start to use fingerprints as a way to identify the Indian inmates in prisons. And this worked far better than the system that they had before. And this was named after a French criminologist named Alphonse Bertillon, who created the system in 1879. So this Bertillon system, instead of using fingerprints, would measure parts of your body. So it would measure how tall you are, it would measure your wingspan, the length of your fingers, the length of your arms, the shape of your ears, the circumference of your head, but it also measured features such as your eye color, your hair color, your scars.
Which doesn't work if you bring it, for instance, to Africa or to India, where most of the people have the same hair color and the same color
Exactly.
eyes.
So science has told us that a lot of races are unable to look at distinguishing features in other races. So white people find it hard to see differences in black people similarly find it hard in white people. So this Bertillon system became very hard, especially at the height of colonialism. And so the fingerprint system became perfect, right? So in 1858, you have what we know now as a modern fingerprint forensic test. But the question we want to ask today is, has this innovation caused more problems than it has solutions? And I think that when we look at case law and a lot of incidences where people whose fingerprint was misfound or misused end up living or staying in prison on account of this evidence that is being misused.
Yeah. So just before, and I'll speak a little bit about the legal complications that fingerprints has brought about. But here's a fun fact about how fingerprints actually emerge.
Okay.
So fingerprints are actually formed in the womb, right? And they form when the growing baby applies pressure on their hands and I think
on their surroundings,
to their surroundings, and in particular to their head and the hair on their head, right? So the prints you actually see on your fingers,
and they're unique because, of course, two people can touch something the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so this is how they emerge. But let me give the story of how a case in point in which fingerprints ended up, getting somebody wrongly convicted.
Okay.
And it was following the Madrid train bombings of 2004. And the police latched onto what you call latent fingerprints. So fingerprints are actually distinguished as two. There's the pretty obvious ones to the naked eye, which are called the patent prints. And then there's the latent prints.
The ones I can't see but that are there.
Precisely. They're there, but you've got to, dust them a little bit so that they become visible.
Yeah.
And so the police, while investigating, noted some of these latent prints. And they led them to about 20 possible matches in their FBI database. And out of the 20, they zeroed in on one, an Islamic suspect, whom they ended up detaining for quite a while. But shortly thereafter, the Spanish authorities did a more thoroughgoing inspection, and they actually zeroed in on the correct suspect.
Yeah, and that case was actually very interesting because bias is what caused them to follow the first suspect. Because what happened, he was actually a white American, but he had just converted to Islam. And the second thing, he was a lawyer and he was defending people who were participating in the Iraqi war. So the bias on the side of the police, because they saw these two things that they found suspicious, made them really zero in on the fact that this latent print was indeed his.
Yeah, precisely.
So in January of 2002, there's a judge, his name is Pollack, and he went into a case in which fingerprints were used, and for the first time ever said that fingerprint identification is not a legitimate form of scientific evidence. Bear in mind that from about 1910 in America, they've been using fingerprints wholesale. In fact, I was looking through Kenya's own database and found that we quoted the 1910 American case as our reason for using these things. And I have to say that for this part, I have to say that law bears a part in giving us fingerprint evidence as an objective standard. For this, because we have what we call precedent. Precedent is when something is decided in one case and one court, and then the next court, instead of objectively using a different measure to look at it, says if these guys did it, then they must have weighed it, and they have a snowball effect. So we then apply wholesale the principle that was applied in the previous case. And that's what happened with fingerprints. One court used it, the next court accepted it, and for 150 years, we've all just accepted the fingerprints are an identifiable source. Everyone has a separate one. But this judge, who later recanted when he came back to his senses and realized there's a whole profession riding on this, said that there is no objective standard for evaluating whether two prints match. Why? Because most of the time, the accuracy is taken for granted by the prosecutor and the defendant alike. But if you were to bring two experts into the same room, they would have conflicting opinions on whether what counts as sufficient basis for you to have a match. So a lot of the time they use, and as JM has said, they look at the way your print goes, and it usually goes in a swirl. And they look at where you have grooves or notches or where you have points that are identifiable or unique. Now, there is no objective measure on how many points you need for it to be a match.
I think what's even more interesting is what happens when you don't have those grooves, or your grooves are not as defined as other people's are.
Absolutely, and I am one such person. I am one of very, very few people in the world with very faint fingerprints. And let me tell you guys, I have really struggled. And I continue to struggle today. I don't know if I've told you this story, but there's once I was coming in from London, and I get to JKIA, and they pulled me aside, while taking my prints, because I struggled putting my prints in for about 5 minutes, and they tell me, go aside. And I was collected and taken to a detention center.
That's more room you never want to go in.
For 20 minutes. And the guy, a policeman comes around, he sits down, plain clothes, and he starts saying, Kijana, why don't you have fingerprints? What is the matter with you? What are your prints? And he quickly looks at his database. He's searching faces. What is your name? Give me your passport. Against his database, telling me, are you a criminal? Do you have intentions to blow up this place and do all sorts of things?
I don't know.
So I said to myself, kumbe, I could have had a career in as a criminal. Honestly, I could have, right?
But before we close this episode, I want to bring in new technology, because there's also one more thing that we've accepted wholesale and as well in the courts as identifying criminals and placing people in crime scenes. And I'll bring to point a very funny story that happened in Europe. So they had Interpol was looking for this phantom. They called him the Phantom of Heilbronn, who was a serial killer, murderer, burglar, and who had committed crimes across France, Germany, and Austria, and had left their DNA in over 40 crime scenes. And they were looking for this person because they were convinced that they had a phantom person who was able to transcend boundaries, borders, and it was interesting that they couldn't find them, yet they had the DNA. After a lot of testing, they found out that the he was actually a she, and that the she was actually a factory worker in a factory that made DNA swabs. So they discovered that this poor lady, whenever she made the DNA swabs, left a lot of her DNA, and we do this all the time. We shed skin, we shed hair, and we put that DNA onto whatever
everything we touch.
And she had left the DNA on the swabs. Now, whenever you had the forensic officers going to these unrelated crimes, they then left her DNA
at the crime scene.
And I think that is something that we should look at on DNA and know that it is not also foolproof. We can transfer our DNA onto things that exist, and then those things can incriminate us. So we shouldn't also take it wholesale.
So forensic techniques are not perfect.
They're not perfect, no. And I think as an innovation that was so revolutionary at the time, we did buy into it wholesale. We co-opted into it, and globally it has become the standard. So I think that when we talk about innovations, yes, there's some that are resisted and then end up becoming useful. But at the same time, we do need to question some of these innovations we have, like Huduma number.
This is Winning Headline. Today we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from Gabo of the Standard. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and take a moment to look for us on your TV screens. We are available on Pan, Free to Air, GoTV, and Star Times. The point of today, question. Always question. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.